What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And I thought we would do the normal thing you do on stupid YouTube when you get a new vehicle and then you complain about things that you hate about the vehicle. But this is kind of more on the technician or mechanic side of things. So today we're going to be talking about the 5 things that I hate about my new 392 Jeep Wrangler. Now, this always seems to bring out some really crazy comments on people saying, hey, you know, if you hate it so much, why do you have it? Why did you buy it? But no, of course, there is a ton to love about the 392 Wrangler. Of course, the big rowdy 6.4 liter V8 under the hood, the exhaust noise, the acceleration. And to be honest, the thing gets really good gas mileage. Maybe this one's a weird one, but this is doing 15 and a half miles to the gallon in my just normal daily driving, which is a decent amount of 65 mile an hour kind of highway driving. This is doing the same fuel economy that my 24 V6 with the 488 gears was getting. And this is kind of more consistently getting that 15 and a half. So I cannot complain about the fuel economy, which is probably one of the things you assumed from the title. But no, like I said, this is going to be more mechanical technician side of things, and I'm going to hopefully show you guys what I'm talking about. So we've got our cheat sheet here with everything in question. Now, one thing being a mechanic that I'm often doing is opening and closing hoods. And if you guys didn't know, this is the exact same hood that the Mojave Jeep Gladiators have. It is the really cool, you know, Ram Air style hood, and it's domed up considerably taller than a normal JL hood, which is awesome. It looks great, but there's one heavy issue with this hood. This hood is unfortunately made out of steel. And you might be going, well, why? Why is that an issue that the hood is made out of steel? That's because every other JL has a hood made out of aluminum. Now, yes, we do have our aluminum issues with JLs with door hinge corrosion, hood corrosion, and tailgate corrosion. But if you don't think about all of that big, huge mess, one of the cool things about aluminum panels on a vehicle is less weight, you know, a little better fuel economy, a little better what have you. And yeah, again, we're talking about fuel economy on a Wrangler, but when you're off-roading and you're trying to make it up obstacles, if you have a, you know, 20 pounds less hanging out off the front of the vehicle, that's only beneficial. Now, yes, it still off-roads fine, but every time I open one of these 392 hoods or a Mojave Gladiator hood, I'm just always reminded how stupidly heavy these darn things are. Now, I've kind of always wondered, why did they make these out of stamped steel instead of aluminum, like, again, every other JL hood? And I actually had a buddy who does metal stamping or manufacturing, and he looked at this hood and said, that's why they don't do it. This area here in the hood hinge area is a complex curve. You've got the hood, you know, rolling down and then rolling back on itself. So it's making 2 different turns. He said, an aluminum hood in that section, you'd be so much more prone to cracking or breaking. Now, of course, there would be a way to do it, but maybe manufacturing costs would be even higher. So stamped steel is considerably more malleable or more durable in apparently a complex kind of curve back on itself like that. So that's why we have 100-pound hoods on these things. It's just would be kind of cooler to myself if it was aluminum like every other JL. Now, again, talking about that 6.4 liter Hemi under the hood, which is awesome and amazing, but we end up with an exhaust crossover underneath the vehicle that is, to me, a blatant afterthought. If you've not been underneath or under the frame of a 392, you've got a massive, massive exhaust pipe section to let the big V8 under the hood breathe, but where that pipe comes down from the driver's side manifold the passenger side and crosses over in front or below of the transmission pan and hangs down below the factory crossmember. And from the factory, there's absolutely nothing protecting it. So if you're actually going to use your 392 off-road, you're going to immediately be wanting to spend money to try and buy a nice exhaust skid plate, a engine skid plate, full belly skids, something of that matter so you can protect that piece. Now, I believe I looked up that exhaust crossover section and it's multiple $1,000s, of course, like every other part on a vehicle, but still something that fragile or something that, you know, problem prone on an off-road vehicle just seems like an absolute afterthought that it was just, well, we got no other room for it. Let's throw a big, huge, massive crossover underneath. Now, I've thrown the Next Venture Motorsports engine skid plate on this thing, which does have provisions to cover most of the exhaust crossover. So the pictures I'm hopefully throwing up here are my skid plate installed, but from the factory, I'll see if I can find one of, you know, a nice undershot. There is absolutely nothing but a little 1-inch piece of metal covering kind of right in the middle. So again, on an off-road vehicle, when it says Rubicon on the hood, you'd hoped something was kind of thought through a little bit more, but again, it's an afterthought. I'm sure they were shoehorning the motor in and making it work and making it fit, but it just is unfortunate for some of us users that are going to actually be off-road and using the vehicle in the rocks. Now again, another issue or another functional technical side of things on the 392, but it isn't just limited to the 392. We're going to be talking about 392 diesel and any Extreme Recon or Extreme 35 package Jeep, since they all get the same frame. And unfortunately, up front, we have a extremely long bump stop tower. And if you don't know what I'm talking about the big metal tube in the middle of the front coil springs. Now, the purpose of that big metal tube is to bolt or mount the lower bump stop on, and when the axle travels upward, it has something to strike and prevent the wheel and tire from coming up higher into the fender, which is a good thing when you're off-road, but unfortunately, these are excessively long. They are way too long. Even with 37s bolted on these things, you still have not enough up travel and you can't even rub a 37 in the wheel well. So they're just way too long. Now, what is the purpose of the long bump stop towers? It's to prevent the axle from traveling up, hitting the oil pan, hitting different components like that. But guys have found that you can reduce the length of that thing and still have it work completely fine. So it's just a very unfortunate thing. That is also shared with the Extreme 35 and Extreme Recon package V6s or 2-liter turbos. So again, there's multiple platforms that you're dealing with that extremely long bump stop tower. It's just really reducing the amount of up travel. In stock form, some of these have an inch or two of up travel before they're into that bump stop tower. So again, another thing that wasn't really thought through very well from the Jeep engineers, because if you're going to be using the thing off-road, you want wheel and tire travel, and you can't even rub a 37 with those factory bump stop towers. So again, I'm picking at things, but again, it's things that if you're going to be using the Jeep off-road, you're going to be finding out, because that wheel is going to be banging off the bump stops pretty darn often up front here. Now, the next kind of annoyance is the transfer case shifter. This is going to be kind of 2-in-1 or 1-in-2, I guess, here for the biggest gripes with the 392. The biggest issues, the thing that I actually do hate and is, to me, a pretty big issue. All 392s come with the unfortunate MP3032 or 33. I'll have to put the correct transfer case number up here on the screen, but it doesn't really matter. This is a clutch type transfer case, and there is no mechanical lock in for high or for low. And again, for that matter, you don't even have a 2-wheel drive position. The 392 has a all-wheel drive position, a all-wheel drive lock or for high, neutral, and for low. So there is no way to just have this darn thing in 2-wheel or rear-wheel drive. And I'm sure the engineers were trying to reduce the amount of stress on that rear axle by having it an all-wheel drive transfer case, because you've always got a little bit of force going to the front, and they didn't want the rear tires spinning constantly. But The fact you can option this transfer case in the Gladiators or Wranglers, and it does come with a two-wheel drive position, just absolutely frustrates me that you can't have that two-wheel drive position in a 392, because the transfer case is very, very capable of having that two-wheel drive position. The engineers just didn't allow us to do it. So that's unfortunate that we have the capability, but don't have the actual position on our shifter. Now again, kind of back to the worst issue, which is kind of the same issue that we've been talking about, is that transfer case design. Again, this is a clutch type transfer case. There is no mechanical differential lock, if you will. And there's going to be some people in the comment that say, nope, you're wrong. This thing can lock in four-wheel drive low, but unfortunately, I've been through the service information. I've done the research. This thing cannot lock itself in four low. The extent of it locking into four high or four low is using the transfer case shift motor or the clutch shift motor to apply the clutches as hard as it can. And in most cases, it will work fine. But as we start driving, as we start getting miles on these things, as the transfer case gets warm, that clutch effectiveness reduces to the point where the clutches start slipping. Once we have clutch slip, we will get a service four-wheel drive message saying transfer case clutch is worn. At that point in the dealership, we are then replacing the transfer case, or we are replacing the transfer case clutches. Now, yes, that's great, fine and dandy while we are in warranty, but what if you're out on the Rubicon Trail and you get transfer case clutches worn code, you can't apply four-wheel low? There's just a numerous amount of issues that can come up from a very inadequate style transfer case like this. Another thing that has happened, I've seen a few guys talk about it on the Jeep forums with this transfer case. Again, it doesn't even need to be the 392. The Gladiator and normal Wranglers can also option this transfer case. If we have a wheel speed sensor issue, one of the four wheel speed sensors has an issue, this transfer case can default out of a locked position. And again, if you're in an off-road situation, you're out crawling hundreds of miles down a trail and your transfer case acts up because you've got a wheel speed sensor issue, then that's a horrible, horrible system. So that is my biggest thing I'm always thinking about in the back of my mind, is this darn transfer case. Now, there's a couple of ways you can remedy that issue. The big boys with big money are buying Atlas transfer cases, bolting them in and having an indestructible transfer case that you can select two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive high, four-wheel drive low, etc. There is another option. There's a couple of companies, off-road companies, that have kind of cannibalized transfer cases. You can take this 392 transfer case, take the thing apart, and then make one out of a sport transfer case, because you need a full sport transfer case and the 392 transfer case, and you swap the internals basically between the two, and you can make one real transfer case. It has a locked position in four high, a locked position in four low, and most importantly, the darn thing will have two-wheel drive. Now, there's going to be some other programming involved with the drivetrain control module and etc., but there is an option or two to make this thing actually bulletproof or a lot more reliable as they start getting more and more miles on them. So this one, of course, is still under warranty, and it's been fine because it's low mileage, but it's something to, again, think about on a higher mileage 392 purchase, or, like I said, Wrangler or Gladiator with that transfer case. Now, you can always tell those transfer cases because they will have a auto position. Even the ones with two-wheel drive, the non-392s, if it has a auto position anywhere on that transfer case shift knob, it has that clutch type transfer case, and yeah, it's not the best, unfortunately. So guys, that was kind of my big, long technician mechanic side of things rant on the 392. Now, were they all little piddly things? Yeah, kind of, except for the big glaring transfer case issue. We've got some packaging issues with our exhaust crossover, of course, hanging down low, and kind of a non-issue, but the extremely ridiculously heavy hood on these things, which is just kind of ridiculous every time you open it. But other than those issues, they're of course a very, very awesome Jeep. I've really enjoyed driving it. It's fun being able to roll into that throttle off the line and just blast up through traffic, because it does work really well. This thing has actually been to the drag strip, and I didn't really make a video because our drag strip is pretty horrible and didn't have the 1/4 mile timing, but it's been down the drag strip and everybody was really surprised, of course, to see a Wrangler out there ripping down the drag strip. But guys, let me know down in the comments, what am I wrong on? What am I right on? What are your issues that you've got with your Wrangler 392, what have you? And guys, thanks for coming out here into the driveway with me and complaining about my purchase. And guys, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.